Morning everybody, we're going to have a look at this 25 mark question, which would be actually an evaluate question. This is about whether the government can be the most productively efficient provider, allocatively efficient provider and dynamically efficient provider of goods and services within an economy. And this really is combining the work that you've learnt about in themes 3, theory of the firm, but also theme 4, looking at government and how they're spending their money, and looking at tax revenue and government spending. This says, to what extent do you agree with this view? We could change this to say, evaluate the extent to which you agree with this view, full stop. And that would make this like one of the evaluate questions that you might get. Right, I'll talk you through the question first. With the right controls and incentives in place, question what that means. Government can be a cost-effective provider, so they can be productively efficient, producing the level of goods and services consumers desire, that's being allocatively efficient, whilst at the same time being innovative, so being dynamically efficient. And we want to know whether we agree with this statement or not. Remember, because it says evaluate, we need to make sure that we are giving our knowledge, our application, our analysis. We're also doing thinking for our valuation, thinking beyond those points, and we have to have a conclusion at the end. So you need to sum up how much you agree with this and the main reasons why, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. Now, with an evaluate question, ideally you want to try and include a diagram, and here a price-cost revenue diagram would be the most appropriate, because then you can illustrate where these different types of efficiency occur, particularly productive and allocative efficiency. So we'll just draw a diagram here, your average revenue curve, and then your marginal revenue curve, your marginal cost curve, and let's put in the profit maximizing level of output would be here. But we're not going to be looking at that right now, because we just want to know where productive efficiency and allocative efficiency occur. So you don't need to put any equilibriums in just yet. Your long run average cost curve, remember, intersecting the marginal cost at its lowest point. And on this diagram, we know that productive efficiency occurs here at the lowest point of the long run average cost curve, where it intersects marginal cost. And we know that allocative efficiency occurs where price equals marginal cost, which is here. And we're now going to talk about those points in our answer. So the first thing that you need to do is to break down the question, how you're going to talk about everything. I would do this by talking about whether the government can be productively efficient, then saying whether they can be allocatively efficient, whether they can be dynamically efficient, and then giving your conclusion. Overall, do you think that they can be these three things? Perhaps some of them, perhaps none of them, or perhaps all of them. And I would recommend that you go through each one in this question and evaluate your point as you go along. So the first one, whether they're productively efficient. You can start off by saying that productive efficiency occurs at this point, and so productive efficiency is where LRAC equals MC. We know that this is the lowest point of the long run average cost curve, so average costs are at their lowest. And this is also to do with gaining economies of scale, because if you're here, you've maximised the amount of economies of scale you can take advantage of. Were you to go up here, you'd start having diseconomies of scale. So you could say that the government can be productively efficient because they can make sufficient quantity. So they can make sufficient output to take advantage of economies of scale. If you didn't have just the government producing products, then you could argue that actually your level of output would be lower than this quantity here, if we call that Q. You may actually be producing less than Q if you were producing as a firm rather than the government producing everything. So for this reason, you could say that they would be productively efficient. So that's agreeing with the point. However, you could also say that if they're the only producer, So, but if they're the only producer, maybe your output's higher and you actually get diseconomies of scale. The point here is that if you are producing more than Q as the government, because maybe that's what's demanded, then you start coming over here, and as you come over here, actually your long run average costs are increasing as output increases, and that means you've got diseconomies of scale. So this here is your evaluation of your point. The next thing that you can talk about is your allocative efficiency. Allocative efficiency occurs where price equals marginal cost. That's at this point here. So price equals marginal cost. And remember, this is where consumer satisfaction is maximized. And you can argue that if the government are producing everything, they are capable of understanding where this point is. So they can, government can understand where this is, they can find that out because they care about the people in their country, and they can produce at that point because they're working in the interests of the electorate or the people in their country, people who are voting in their country. So this would be an argument why the government could be allocatively efficient. Also, if you are allocatively efficient, it's likely that if the government are being allocatively efficient, they are producing more. So it's a higher quantity that's being produced than if produced by firms. We know on the diagram, if you had firms producing things, you'd be producing at the profit maximizing level of output, which is here. Whereas if you're allocatively efficient, the government are choosing to maximize consumer satisfaction, they'd be producing here. So it would be a higher quantity. And they're more likely to want to do that because they don't have the profit motive. So they don't have the profit motive. And we could say that they care about the people. This, of course, is a big question. This point here about the government caring about the people, the government having the interests of the electorate at heart. Do they really believe that they want to help the people? And this is something in economies where the government does have complete control of the factors of production. If you're looking at Cuba, or if you're looking at North Korea, for example, are they actually doing what's in the interests of the people? And are they actually producing at an allocatively efficient point of output? I'm going to carry on the question in a second video.